Here and Now, the program featuring the news and interests of the African American community. Here's your host, Sandra Bookman.
Coming up, improving the heart health of Black men, how a partnership between Mount Sinai and the Real Dads Network is changing habits and saving lives. Also ahead, celebrating Black History Month, the short film that explores how Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. used basketball to engage young voters, how the Living History program at New York City's oldest museum is telling the true stories of enslaved African Americans, and the world premiere of the Hula Hooping Queen at New York City's Children's Theater. That's all ahead on Here and Now. As we mark American Heart Health Month, we are taking a closer look at health disparities in the Black community. Today, putting a spotlight on often undiagnosed heart conditions in Black men. A local cardiologist is partnering with Black fathers in an effort to change that and improve health outcomes. Joining us today is Dr. Isilma V. Fergus, the Director of Cardiovascular Disparities with Mount Sinai, along with the founder and CEO of Real Dads Network, Derek Phillips. Thank you both for being with us this afternoon, and welcome back to you, Dr. Icy. And I got a feeling, Mr. Phillips, we are going to see you down the road as well. Yep. I was curious as to how this partnership evolved. How did it come about?
That's an excellent question. You know, it started out oftentimes, as it does, with a patient referral. So it turns out that Kenyatta, who's not here today, but he's the program chair for Real Dads, is one of my patients at Sinai. And we got to talking, and we were like, how can we make things better in the community for men? And it turns out that where they're located is right across from the hospital. Mm-hmm. And we just started doing programs and never looked back.
Yeah, perfect partnership. Yes. And why, Dr. Icy, which is how most people refer to you, why is this such an important area to focus on, Black men and heart health?
It's so important because Black men have the lowest life expectancy of anyone. And many times it's really due to health, particularly heart health. And as we know, heart health is preventable. And so going into the community, meeting people where they are, talking to them on a level that they can, understand, work with, and try to do something, I think really helps and really lowers the threshold for people to start doing what they need to do to get healthy.
And Derek, I mean, it sounds like just the perfect partnership for members of your organization. I mean, Real Dads really focuses on supporting Black fathers, right?
Yes.
And so when you heard about, you learned from Kenyatta, who we talked about, we're not speaking his name in vain, that he had this doctor and she had this thought about really helping other men pay more attention to their health. You thought immediately, you know what a good idea?
What a great idea, because one of the things we do at Real Dads Network is we stress the importance of fathers being involved and engaged with their children and their families. And the big thing that we say is that in order for you to really be there for your family, you have to actually be here.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we know when it comes to Black men, we tend to be the worst in terms of taking care of our health. So we have a Real Dads Health Initiative. So when Kenyatta brought this to my attention, yes. I'm like, that's perfect. It aligns directly with what we're trying to do in terms of educating men about the importance of taking care of their health, and getting men to understand that in order for you to be that real dad, you have to be selfish. And when I say selfish, is that you can't uplift your family if you don't take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. So many times men are talking about taking care of everybody else, but we don't take care of ourselves. Yeah. So we have our cars and that check engine light goes off, we run into the mechanic, right? Yeah. But when that check engine light goes off in our bodies, we don't go see our doctors. So when Kenyatta brought this initiative with Dr. Icy, I'm like, that is perfectly aligned to what we do. And it's also coming from Dr. Icy's in terms of her perspective, who she's well respected in the community. And a lot of times when we're dealing with men need to feel as though, I need to build trust. Mm-hmm. So in terms of bringing
build
Real
trust
Dads
with the doctor,
with the provider,
build trust with the provider. So when you have Real Dads Network, we became this great link. So now as you're coming in through a Real Dads Network, and then we're linking with the hospital, Mount Sinai and Dr. Icy, so that was like a perfect match.
So you're saying to me that because they have trust in Real Dad Networks, when you bring this thought to them and this possibility of working with a provider, they transfer that trust to Dr.
Dr. Icy, and also the work that
Dr.
Dr. Icy has been doing historically in the community as well.
And just a quick question when you mention trust, because we've done interviews in the past where we've talked about particularly black men being mistrustful of doctors, of the system. Did you find that that is the case? Either of you can answer this. I mean, it sounds like it's worked for you because you already had credibility with your members. But do you find that sometimes getting black men to...
I think it's trust, but it's also pride. Sometimes men don't necessarily want to admit what they think it's a weakness, but it's actually a strength to be able to admit that, you know what, I don't feel well, something's not right, let me get checked, let me see what's going on. But then there's the whole trust issue. And you know, historically, many, many eons ago, there were studies and clinical trials where people were taken advantage of, and I think that some of that still reverberates in the community and people talk about it. But I think if you're a provider and you connect with the community, you're able to talk the language, you're able to understand the culture, you're able to go out into the community wherever people are, and people see that you're out there and you're doing these programs, then they're not afraid to come in and see you in the office.
You're meeting them where they are.
Exactly.
So let me ask you, what are there common denominators when we start talking about black men in heart disease? Some of the common denominators, as well as some of the contributing factors to these issues.
Right. So again, I think denial is a big one. So if you're not feeling certain things, so you may not be going in to check very basic things like your blood pressure, like your cholesterol, your blood sugar. That's diabetes, hypertension right there, and high cholesterol. And those are really some of the major risk factors for heart disease. However, there are other conditions that are present more in black men. In fact, 4% or so of the African American male population may have this condition called cardiac amyloidosis. It's not known. It could be silent until it's not. And if you're not checked for it, you may not know about it. Cardiac amyloidosis, it's like a type of protein that gets misfolded. It doesn't work well, and it clogs up the arteries. Things don't work. The muscle of the heart doesn't contract. You can go into heart failure and die and have an irregular heart. There is treatment.
And is it genetic?
It's genetically, it's autosomal dominant, meaning that it can pass from father to son, but it can pass from any parent to anyone. So typically, if you know that someone in the family has it, the child or the offspring should get checked.
Yeah. Yes. And is the percentage of black men that have this condition high? It's
about 4% of the population, but many times the way it starts and the symptoms could mimic other things. So unless you have a high suspicion, sometimes it's missed. And that's why people who recognize that this condition exists, should be involved. And when someone doesn't feel right, a black male not feeling right, should get checked out. We actually brought it to Real Dads because there are different ways you can test. One is a swab in the cheek called a buccal swab.
Which is pretty straightforward.
Which is pretty straightforward, but even if it's not positive and if the suspicion is high, then they can start that connection and the referral is made, they come in and they get checked out.
Okay. Can I ask you, Derek, how have your members responded to this and the feedback you've been getting, because I'm assuming they're involved in conversations about the things how they need to eat, the importance of exercising, but also the important screenings. What's the response been like?
The response has been very positive because one of the things with men is that we know is that when you create a safe space for men, then they're going to show up and they're going to do what they need to do. So one of the things that we do as well is that we've been meeting. We used to meet in person once a month, but COVID came, that changed. We started meeting virtually. We've been meeting virtually every Thursday for 5 years. We have not missed one Thursday. So, and as a result, we're able to have those conversations when men are put in a situation where they feel as though they're safe and they're able to share. So that's how we can talk about issues about men, taking care of your health. Talk about, getting colon cancer, getting screened for colon cancer. So we've created this safe space where men can talk about being vulnerable. And their vulnerability is not looked upon as a weakness, but your vulnerability is looked upon as a strength. Yeah. So we have one of the dads that, says, Dad said, I would die for my children. So we said, we don't want you to die for your children. Why don't you live for them by taking care of your health?
And before I let you guys go, this program's been running now, this initiative, for about a year.
Yes.
Do you anticipate or hoping that you're going to be able to expand it? Because I know you kind of focused on in the development right across the street from the hospital now and working with Real Dads. Is it something you would like to see in other?
Real Dads has been around and they're taking off, but our involvement from the cardiovascular perspective, I want to see that grow. We did 3 in-person programs where we did screening, blood pressures, the swab I talked about, but the fun one was when we did the Thanksgiving program. We had turkeys, we had fruit baskets, we talked about food, and that was well received, right?
Yes, and I think one of the things that we've noticed with men is that you got to use other things to hook them.
To get them,
To get them in. So
we noticed that with women. Women have noticed that too. You got to have something extra.
Yes.
Right. I know. I want to make sure you guys have a good time here as well. I also want to send folks to your individual websites. That's mountsinai.org.
Yes.
And realdadsnetwork.org. This is really an important program. It's kind of a no-brainer. It's so simple, but it's really helping to change some lives and minds. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having us.
It's our pleasure.
Much appreciated.
We will be right back. As we celebrate Black History Month, we're turning our focus to a film that sheds new light on the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The documentary short, Hoops, Hopes, and Dreams, tells the story of how Dr. King and his team used the game of basketball to engage young voters.
And I was a point guard for the civil rights movement. Nobody knew about what was going on in the South. And we had to do something about it. But we don't have any money. We don't have much organization. 2 months before we started demonstrating, he said, "Don't you know any folks out there?" I said, "Not really." And he said, "Well, you got 2 months to find some." The only thing we could do was go where the kids were. They were on the basketball court. We'd sit around, ask if we could take the winner. So we're playing, and I bounced past him the ball. And there was a great big old guy, 6'4". Well, Martin goes up to his right, and this big guy is all over him, gonna block him. But Martin, quick as a cat, fakes him to the right, and then Martin had come back to the left and shot with his left. I couldn't believe it. I said, "I didn't know you could shoot with your left hand." He said, "There's a lot you don't know about me."
Hoops, Hopes, and Dreams is distributed by Anscape, a multimedia platform dedicated to telling stories by and for the Black community and owned by our parent company, the Walt Disney Company. Here today to tell us more is one of the project's producers, Alexis Feaster. Thank you so much for sitting down with us this afternoon, Alexis.
Oh, thank you for having me.
This is a project, I'm curious to know what attracted you to it, because it certainly does give us an interesting look at Dr. King's legacy and all the work he did on civil rights.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the first thing that attracted me to the film was really the team. I got a phone call from one of our producers, the late Michael Ladd. We called him the point guard of our team. And he did some outreach, and I got introduced to him, and he shared that there's only one person that he heard who had worked for President Obama, but also worked in the basketball world, and was curious I'd be interested in joining him and the director, Glenn Kino, and our other producer, Jesse Williams, and telling this untold story. And for me, it felt like a culmination of all of my life's work. Having previously ran the athlete and celebrity strategy for President Obama, and seeing firsthand how important the game of basketball was and his campaign and uniting our communities. And, so for me to be able to be a part of a project that was so closely tied to my background and work that I've done for so long, it did feel.
So I'm curious, Have you ever given, considering your background, which is sort of uniquely qualified to be a part of this documentary, have you before given much thought to those sort of connections between Dr. King's work and Mr. Obama's run for president?
You know, it's funny, not using the game of basketball, no. And I think that what made this story so amazing is that no one had heard of it, right? Like we even looked to find archival footage of him actually using the game of basketball or shooting a 3-point shot or anything, and it just didn't exist. And so for me, it never crossed my mind to have the game be the connectivity point between the two of them. I did know, of course, that the way that, Barack Obama and Martin Luther King Jr. used strategy and leadership and community to build and to galvanize not just voters, but to galvanize support. I knew that, right? I'm a person who, grew up in Southeast DC and know how important it is to know my history, but I had no idea that the game of basketball tied them together.
And this is essentially what this short film does is put a focus on the intersection of politics and basketball and athletics and activism. Um, and I think what Dr. King was able to do, and I didn't know this either, that he really made an effort to meet people where they are, or where they were, I guess I should say. And I think a lot of us thought, he was in the church, he was doing those marches. But talk a little bit about what we see in the film, him walking
And
onto
we were
those
all
basketball
looking at him
courts and
for a
in
minute
his
'cause he had
suit
on a
and
suit.
balling.
Right. Exactly. In his
He took
floor
off
shine
his coat.
shoes and keeping his tie
Didn't
on.
take
And,
off his
I
tie
think that what
and
we
said,
love,
"Okay,
right?
just
And
get me the
our
ball."
director, I know, is who first heard the story from
I'm
Ambassador
looking at
Andrew
him like,
Young. And
and
Ambassador Andrew
that's
Young was
true.
at a gala and just kind of
But he
telling
was
it
a young
flippantly,
man.
like, explaining that him and Dr. King used to hoop and they used to go out to the courts and go into the communities. And I think, the beautiful thing is that when you grow up and you're taught about Dr. King, it's kind of like, oh, he goes out and he marches on Selma, and he goes out and he's, just getting people to follow him. Of course, that can't be true, right? It can't be that that's the only way that he went into a community and said, hey, everybody, let's go. There was a strategy behind that. And I think that, Hoops, Hopes, and Dreams tells the story that it wasn't just him, it was
On the
his
court
whole crew,
and
right? He
on
has a
through the
whole,
civil
all
rights
of his,
movement.
we call him his homies, right? His civil rights leader, the other people that were with
I
him. And
always
I remember, Ambassador
thought of
Andrew Young
myself
telling the
as a
story how he
bodyguard.
gave them the charge.
I
He said,
mean,
you've got 2 months to go
that
out
my
and find some
job
people that we can
was
connect
to
with.
get the
The barrier to entry, to play basketball is so low, right? You can see it, poured at the end of your neighborhood, at the end of your block. You can play it in your driveway. People without hoop can just shoot the ball in the air. There's so much about the game that brings unity and teams and allows you to see people like just as yourselves. And so I think the fact that Dr. King was doing that back in the 50s and the 60s and getting his friends and getting himself to go out to the court and say, let's meet young people where they are so that they can see themselves in us. I mean, that's what we need right now. We want us to be able to see ourselves in leaders.
And really, two things. Dr. King can actually really play ball.
Right.
He wasn't just fronting, he could really play. And I think that I would think that, and I should be asking this question instead of stating what I think, but the fact that you are able to show that to young people who are just learning about his legacy, and instead of seeing him as this icon sitting up on a stone pedestal, you humanize him, and it also reminds all of us of just how young that they all were. I mean, he was assassinated at 39. They were all so young when they were leading this movement that changed America.
Absolutely. And it's, one of the other things that, saying that reminds me of something that his daughter, Dr. Bernice King, was sharing with us in our conversations with her. She said her father was just a man. He's just a man. So we see him as this grand figure, which of course he is in history, but he was just a man who had a calling. He didn't know that this is going to be what his legacy was going to end up to be. But it reminds us all that we can all make a difference in our own ways. We might not all end up being Dr. Martin Luther King. We might not end up being the, President Barack Obama, but who are we in our communities? How can we show up and bring our full selves in the environments that we are in? What are the ways that we can tap into our relatability with each other and the joy that, something like the game of basketball brings? And I feel like, hearing the story and sharing the story with young kids about Dr. King playing basketball allows them to get excited about his legacy. we have so much history erased right now. We have so much misinformation being shared. And for us to be able to tell a story that now my nieces are going to have this as part of his legacy, young people in schools are going to have this as part of his legacy. That's just something that is so powerful.
Quick question for you, and because you worked for President Obama, was he aware of that basketball connection at the time, or was he just doing what seemed to come natural to him on his journey?
Yeah. To my knowledge, she wasn't. It's not something that ever came up in our conversations or ever came up in the way that we were using the game of basketball as a strategic play. But with President Obama, it was his love. He has a passion for the game. So, that one side of it came naturally to him. But where I came in and where, others on the team came in is I ran the athlete and celebrity strategy along with, many of and collaborators. But the way that we used that was, for an example, you have NBA players who aren't wearing helmets like football players. They're, folks follow. And so my job was to empower them and say, your voice matters. Even if you don't think your vote matters, your voice matters. And there's a responsibility to be able to hear your voice as a basketball player, as an athlete. And so President Obama was able to use the game of basketball to draw that connection with other athletes. And then those athletes were able to help then go on the campaign trail and promote, all the great things that President Obama was doing.
And just a quick question before I let you go. The use of animation to tell this story, was that important to you in effectively engaging the audience?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, our director, Glenn Kino, and Pearl Urek, who was our amazing animator, it came up originally because there was no footage. And so you tell a story like this and not have anything to show for it. People want to see a picture, people want to see a video, and we didn't have that. And so it first came to be that how do we actually recreate the fact that Dr. King did play basketball? And Krill is a big basketball fan and wanted it to look as realistic as possible. And so I think that what we were able to do and doing animation obviously is something that connects to young people, but it also I think tells the story, and it always gets the most laughs and the most engagement. Watching Dr. King, do his layups and shoot, go to the left, all thing that I think brings joy to people.
Because as you said earlier, it does remind people that he was simply a man who did extraordinary things. Alexis Pfister, thank you so much for sitting down with us this afternoon. Hoops, Hopes, and Dreams. It's a remarkable short film. You need to take a moment to take a look at it. It is now on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+. Thanks again for being with us.
Thank you. You have a good day.
We'll be right back. The New York Historical is New York City's first museum, documenting more than 400 years of American history. It is marking Black History Month with its program, Living History, Clothing of Enslaved Women and Reclaiming Black Humanity. Our next guest is the manager of this continuing program, a historical interpreter who travels around the country dressed in the attire of enslaved people, sharing real stories about bondage and survival. It's our pleasure to welcome the founder and owner of Not Your Mama's History and the manager of Living History at the New York Historical, Cheney McKnight. So nice to meet you.
Wonderful to be here.
This seems to me, I know you said you've been doing this at New York Historical for 15 years or more, but it almost seems like a no-brainer because it is a great way. You can talk to somebody about it, but when you show them something, I think you really remember it. Do you find that?
Absolutely, especially the families we interact with. It's quite different to explain to people, for example, how itchy the clothing was, but actually pulling out a fresh Osnaburg linen shirt and having the kids saying, here, why don't you touch this? How does that feel? Can you imagine wearing this all day long? And the responses we get, yes, they finally get it.
So, Cheney, how did you become interested in this way of teaching history? How did this get started for you?
Well, it all started around 2012, 2013. I was looking through Facebook, And a friend of mine who I went to middle school with, he was dressed in historical clothing. I first asked him, have you been kidnapped? Are you all right? Blink twice. He was fine. He said he was a living historian. He was a reenactor. And he actually, after speaking with him, I was interested. I was a little bit reserved. And he invited me to an upcoming reenactment, the 250th Gettysburg. It was one of the biggest reenactments to ever be put on. I went. I had a lot of reservations of reenacting as a hobby, but I saw the potential in living history, in educating, as well as connecting with people and moving through the noise of everything that's going on, but targeting directly, introducing people to people of the past.
And so you got on this journey, and now this has been, you've been part of this at the New York Historical during this period of time. And talk to me about the program. How does it work? I know you've said to me it's geared toward families.
Yes.
So they come to the New York Historical, and you come in similar dress to what you have now, right?
Yes. So it really depends on the time period. So we do programs from the 17th century, the 18th century, 19th century, early 20th. And I have clothing that kind of fits with all of those, but also we're trying to be conscious about whether or not something needs costuming, because sometimes it could get gimmicky. And so also being very aware and honoring people who went through a lot during the period. So for example, with some programs, for example, the program we did last year, a birthday party honoring enslaved children. And so I wear modified clothing to honor them instead of wearing what we refer to as historically accurate clothing or something, a close representation. So it
You're
really
just trying to get
depends.
the message
Yes.
across to them. That's really what you're after. And you talked a little bit about, teaching the children about the clothing, just, how uncomfortable it could be, what people were wearing. I think the cloth was called Negro cloth.
So there's Negro cloths was kind of a marketing term for these manufacturers, especially manufacturers in Rhode Island, where they were producing the cloth. It's basically the cheapest fabric they could put together and sell it. So in the 18th century, it was wool, linen and wool, linseed woolsey, linens, and whatever they could sell at the cheapest. If they were trying to sell it to enslavers, they would market it as Negro cloth or slave cloth.
I'll be honest with you, that's the first time I've ever heard of that.
Yeah.
So I'm already educated about something I didn't know. And my understanding is a lot of times that cloth, that clothing matched whatever, not too different from what you saw in Great Britain. If you were a duke or whatever, your people would wear certain uniforms, I guess. So your clothing, your clothing matched maybe the livery of your owner?
So it really depended on what the job of the enslaved person was or who enslaved them. So for example, if we look at wealthy people, maybe the Washingtons or the Lees, they're enslaved persons, especially those who interacted with guests and people of means. Maybe not the people who are working, maybe in the scullery or in the field. They're wearing Negro cloth. But the footmen, the people who are interacting, maybe serving food at the table, they would be wearing livery. Maybe you've seen exhibits with livery on display. They would be made of the colors of the household. And sometimes these colors extend to the carriages, even on the horses. And as enslaved persons, they were human property. They are an extension of their enslaver.
Why is the lesson more likely to be learned if you are helping them feel and touch and see what that life might have been like?
Because just in general, part of the learning process, if you hear something, if you smell something, taste something, feel something, it's more likely to connect with you and stick. But also, I also try to really drive home that it's not just about the conditions of enslavement, but it does help them to understand. For example, the Negro cloth, how different it would have been for a child wearing Negro cloth as opposed to maybe another child who's wearing a very fine wool cloth. And then saying, look at the different experiences of these two children who may be the same age, but the difference is one was born enslaved and the other was born free.
And the reaction that you get from people, adults and children.
I think the biggest reactions is just shock, because most people don't really know about much of the day-to-day conditions of enslaved people. I think most people have an understanding,
sort of a
broad
thought
understanding
about it.
that slavery was bad, and there must have been horrific things that happened. But really taking a look at what was the day-to-day lives for enslaved persons, what did they eat in the morning? What did they, that moment when you get up, is a mother, enslaved mother, is she preparing herself first, or is she waking up her children? How is she preparing her children for a day where they're going to be trained to be enslaved for the rest of their lives?
In addition to the work that you do at the New York Historical, you also, Not Your Mama's History, it's kind of your own thing.
Yes.
And I was talking to you before about what do we call it? Is it consultancy? Because you do have a YouTube channel by the same name where you teach these lessons, right?
Yes.
And the other part of this, your vocation here, is that you go out to other places and do similar teaching. Why is this work so important to you?
I am a descendant of enslaved persons, and I feel so connected to both my ancestors and my elders who have taught me and really brought me along to this point. I feel in many ways indebted to both of these groups of people. I feel indebted to the ancestors to make sure that their descendants know who they were, and that the world understands the contribution that they gave, the sacrifices that they made. And it has been a mission to share that with my fellow New Yorkers and fellow Americans.
You are just a walking wealth dictionary of information, and your belief that this is history that needs to be shared is really important, and I applaud you for it. And the New York Historical as well. I mean, it's just a fantastic program, quite frankly, an ongoing program. And if I send folks to the website there, nyhistory.org, they can find out when some of your offerings will be available, right?
And we have a lot coming up this month.
Yeah, it's a big month. And then also I want to send folks to notyourmamashistory.com. That is the website for your enterprise.
Yes.
nyhistory.org and notyourmamashistory.com.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So much for joining us this afternoon. No, it's just an interesting way and a compelling way of sharing important history with people, especially young people. It makes it accessible and understandable. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll be right back. Slam dunks, fast breaks, and impossibly creative ball handling. That's what you can expect when the Harlem Globetrotters hit the court. The globally recognized squad now kicking off the Harlem Globetrotters 100-year tour. With us today, Keith Dawkins, the president of the Harlem Globetrotters, and Bronx-born veteran Globetrotter Brawley Cheese Chisholm. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks for having us. Super happy to be here.
You'd say Harlem Globetrotters and everybody gets excited. 100 years is nothing to sneeze at. So what do you think it is that has helped the Globetrotters to last?
You know, I'll use the hallways as a kind of barometer to that question, and it's not exaggeration. Anywhere we go around the globe, you see people walk through, they see the red, white, and blue, they see the players, and grown adult women and men, and it's like the little kid in them lights up. And there's something really unifying about joy, hope, laughter, possibilities, across every part of the globe. It brings people together, and I just think that thing, that love and that deep sense of humanity, that's the thing that makes us last for 100 years.
And I admit, when I walked out of the door before you got in here and I saw you sitting there, it made me feel excited like a kid again, because the first time I saw the Globetrotters was as a kid with my parents, and I think we may have gone every single year. Some of it, I think my dad had 4 daughters and he didn't know what to do with us. So he figured, how can I entertain them and entertain myself? So we went to see the Globetrotters. I always, it's a question, I think a 10-year-old boy, who's going to win, Superman or Batman, right? So when I would remember thinking, well, if they played the Houston Rockets or the Los Angeles Lakers, who would win?
Well, a few things I'll say to that. One, the Globetrotters did beat the Lakers, the then Minneapolis Lakers and George Mikan, and they were world champions, right? So that answers that part of the question. We were talking about it earlier, that one of our legendary icons, Sweet Lou Dunbar from University of Houston, in your neck of the woods, right? He's a Globetrotter. So, we've had really magical top tier, and we still do, elite talent on the team. We have players called up to Dallas Mavericks G League affiliate last year. We signed a player she was on LSU's national championship team in 2022, second round pick of the WNBA draft. We have players on the team who have been on WNBA rosters, who have played professional. So these are cream of the crop basketball players.
I could say you guys know how to ball, as they say. I think they still say that, don't you? Brawley's looking at you like,
They definitely do.
Brawley, is this something that did you aspire to play with the Globetrotters growing up here?
That's an interesting question, right? I'll go all the way back to being 6 years old. And I think just the joy of basketball at that time for me was, we all have dreams and aspirations of just the pureness of the sport. And just think about, like, any kid that plays any sport, they say, I want to go to Duke, I want to go to certain different organizations, right? And sometimes you might have to go to St. Francis or LIU.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like with me, I just knew basketball is what set me free. And the Globetrotters gave me opportunity. And who am I to say no with something of this stature and with this so much prestige behind it?
So I got 2 questions for you. One, I want to know where the Cheese nickname came from. And second, your best moves on the court.
Well, my Cheese name came from my smile, They call me Cheese. I feel like I have the best smile in the world. And it's the joy I have when I'm on the court. And basketball honestly saved my life. Being a New York City kid, it kept me out of trouble, kept me on a straight path. And my favorite trick, I got recruited for the Globetrotters shooting a 4-point shot.
Okay. 4 points.
4-point shot, 35 feet from the basket. There's a lot of debates going around who started the 4-point shot. We did.
I see him over there going.
We did. Exactly, we did. And I shoot at a high clip, over 50%. And my favorite trick would have to be the Globetrotters trademark, the infamous spinning the ball. But my favorite trick is spinning the ball on somebody else's finger. We visit so many children's hospitals around the world, so many schools. And I just love the impact it gives to other people.
Yeah. You know what? I have over the years, because I am a person of a certain age, I have interviewed quite a few Globetrotters.
Nice.
And one of the things that I have noticed during those interviews, and I feel the same thing from you guys, the absolute joy of doing what you do. I mean, you're obviously really good at it, but there just seems to be this enthusiasm and love for not only the game, but the crowd.
Yeah, I tell people that, and I think this has been true throughout our history, but, just use a sporting event as an example. You can use society as an example. You have people showing up and they're booing referees, they're rooting for one team, they're rooting for other, even in an Olympic moment, right? People, the Olympics brings everyone together. You're rooting for your country. All of humanity comes into a Globetrotter game with all of their divisive stuff outside that arena. And when they come in, everyone's smiling, everyone's happy, everyone's joyous, and it's the best of humanity. So when you see that, it's hard not to buy into that because you're seeing the best of us. It actually makes you concerned, like, why are we not like this all the time? But you see it, and the Globetrotters have been doing that for 100 years and bringing that. And by the way, it's around the globe. So it's really a special thing, and I think that's the energy you feel, because once you see it, you just want to represent that everywhere you go.
And I know that you're gonna be I don't, am I calling it performing or am I calling it playing? Because it's a show.
What's his entertainment? What's his entertainment?
Yeah, I always say it's a balance too. I really feel like we're in a league of our own.
Well, you are.
With what we do. When you come to a Globetrotter game, you know what to expect. And I feel like with the longevity that we have and why we're successful is because we keep things simple. Not to give things away, it's about modernizing what we have now. For the older generation, they might have loved metal log limit and curly nail. They love the water bucket and the confetti. And I feel like that's where a lot of businesses fail because they change too much. We know who we are all the way through this 100 years, and we change accordingly and adjust accordingly. And that's why we're here so long. And I feel like from 6 years old to 60 years old,
Yeah.
like you're gonna have a great time across the board. And that's the Globetrotter spirit of what we give to people.
Yeah, you're going to laugh and you're all like going to go, how did he do that?
Right.
It's always, you're saying that. Harlem Globetrotters. Now, it started in Chicago, though.
Yeah.
So,
100 years ago, 1926, Abe Saperstein, Jewish immigrant with big ideas. The Savoy Five, this all black kind of barnstorming team. For the young people that know barnstorming, both in baseball, you really saw this a lot. You even saw Babe Ruth, in the summer times in the off season, playing with teams and traveling all around the country. But brought that idea together for basketball. And, I tell people is around the Globetrotter. So, everyone who's kind of like a marketer or someone with a big idea, it's like Globetrotter, aspirationally. This team is going to travel the globe and bring it, right? That's the name? Think about Harlem then, though. Music, fashion, politics, culture, culinary, everything. It was the place of that, right? So bring those two ideas together, you get Harlem Globetrotters, and
which
here we
makes
are.
sense, right? Somebody was a marketing genius, right? So on this particular tour, you're going everywhere, not just in the United States.
Yeah, hell, and I think, sometimes people, they wouldn't know it, but, between December and end of April, that's 250 tour dates in North America, US, and Canada, everywhere around that part of planet Earth, and then another 150 tour dates around everywhere else, Australia, New Zealand, Asia, African continent, South America, Central America. So the Globetrotters are literally everywhere, and that's just the tour. We're not even talking about all the screens that we're on and licensing to sewer parks and all these other places. So our desire is to be, when I lay in bed every night, people are like, what do you want me for? I'm like, I want everyone to have a touch point to the Harlem Globetrotters. Whatever device they're on, whatever retail outlet they go into the tour, just to be able to experience the brand in a way that makes sense for them.
Yeah. And to experience what I think you guys just described, what the brand stands for.
Right.
Yeah, especially in these days.
Right.
When I don't think we all trying to figure out what we're standing for. You, in fact, are going to be in Brooklyn this afternoon, right?
Yeah, Barclays.
Barclays.
So people come on out, you see us, you got tickets yet. It's a great show. I do say to people, in order to really feel it, if you haven't experienced it, come see a Globetrotter game and you really fundamentally understand what it's about. And there's other people who have been there. There's a person who, she just came through this. It's like her 100th show that she did for her 50th birthday. And she shows up, you're like, what? But we have rabid, infectious fans like that. To the little kid who's just their first experience.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great thing. And I got to, even as I listen to you talk, Bradley, you get the sense that you love it. You're not feeding me something that you've been taught in media training. You genuinely feel so blessed to be able to do what you do.
100%. And it all comes, well, one, I think, let's take basketball away from it. I think it's a personality trait. It's about, I always wanted to be great at everything I did, because at the end of the day, it's business as usual. I have to make shots. Players have to make their dunks. And, but in between those lines of why are you here? Hey, right now it's Black History Month, right? So before I became a Harlem Globetrotter, I had to learn how to be a Globetrotter in a sense of knowing the history, and the fact I've been here for 15 seasons is more profound for me. So I know you can't knock me off my square. I know what I'm standing on. I know it's Will Chamberlain, Curly Neal, Natsby Water Clifton, the first African-American to sign an NBA contract. We used to open up for the NBA years back because we were the games that they couldn't get fans in the crowd. So I think we say it all the time, we are Black history, and since I know that, it's a certain type of confidence I walk with.
Yeah, and pride.
And pride.
And pride.
Absolutely.
If I send folks to harlemglobetrotters.com, They can find out where you are, when you're there. And of course, we said Brooklyn today.
Yep.
And then on the 21st, you're going to be in Uniondale, Long Island. And I know you'll be coming to Madison Square Garden not too long after that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you guys
Yo, honorary.
for being with us. You always, it makes me happy, makes me feel good.
Bring get you out the game. Maybe we can get some swag, make you an honorary Globetrotter.
With my
So we got nails.
barely 5'4" self.
That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're going to spin right now. We're not done. You ready?
Okay.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, we're cheating.
Let's get it.
Because he was holding up.
That's very work.
But you have to teach me that. We're going to be right back. It is a New York City Children's Theater world premiere production, The Hula Hoopin' Queen, the musical. It's based on the book, The Hula Hoopin' Queen of 139th Street, and it tells the story of a young girl in Harlem chasing a dream and learning some lifelong lessons. Here to tell us more is director Jasmine Richardson, along with Sammy Lopez, producing director for New York City Children's Theater. So nice to meet you guys.
Thank you
I've
so
already
much.
fallen in love with Jasmine because she's a fellow Texan, Houstonian.
Yes, ma'am.
And Sammy, I love you too. So I'm going to have you start to just talk to me, Sammy, about what it is that the New York City Children's Theater, why it's important.
You know, with New York City Children's Theater, we are entering into our 30th season of creating original new works for families and young kids, and really prioritizing the power of literacy and how we can bring books and turn them to life, such as The Hula Hoopin' Queen. And we're able to really bring exciting team members to help us realize these shows so New Yorkers can see the diversity of our city reflected on stages.
Yeah, and it, honestly, in the city, you know, where theater is at the heart of so much we do here, I guess it's important to have the work that you guys do. You bring kids into the fold early and lock into their imagination and kind of show them why and how they're part of that big picture when it comes to the world of theater as well.
Yes, it activates conversation. It's like if our students who come see the show aren't leaving the theater continuing the extensions of the themes of the play, then we really need to identify, like, how do we keep our conversations going to make our communities stronger and more united.
Yeah, and I guess in a way you also show the kids that they have a real voice in this.
Absolutely, it's important for them to see themselves.
And Jasmine, we got to give you your props. As Sammy pointed out, you're doing double duty, starring in Book of Mormon.
I'm doing the Book of Mormon in the evenings, and I will be directing the Hula Hoopin' Queen in the daytime.
And so why is directing this something that you felt like you just really wanted to get your fingers into?
You know what? These characters were written in such a beautiful way, and I recognize these women, the nurturing, the caring, the love, the support. And so I said, I see myself in these women, and I want other New Yorkers to see themselves on stage. So it's really important to bring that story here because it's based in New York, and I figured, you know, why not?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And what is the difference for you when it comes between acting in a show and being directed by somebody else and actually being the maestro, being the boss?
Well, it's completely different. When you're an actor, you're just kind of a puzzle piece.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're the director, you're the captain.
Yeah.
So you approve every decision, everything that people are seeing, you have to approve of or decide on. And that is a different way of storytelling that I love, because I can tell the story from the beginning to the end with the lights, the set, the actors, versus being in the show and it's kind of singular. I'm kind of focused on what I'm doing. So that's the exciting part, is I have hands in all the different parts. So I'm really excited for people to see the show.
So it speaks to the bossy girl in you.
To be a
I'm not
boss,
calling
you
you out because
understand.
I'm bossy. And I have no problem with telling you that.
Absolutely,
I'm
I
bossy.
see. I know that's right.
Is there a difference in working with young people than directing, you know, older, more experienced, mature actors?
Absolutely. And the young women that are in the show vary in age, but they are all adults.
Yeah.
So the show is catered towards kids and families, but these women are adults. And so they get to make their own decisions when it comes to developing these characters. So it's exciting to see what they bring to these roles.
And the story, I love that the Hula Hoopin' Queen, 139th Street.
Street.
Yeah, I see that little girl popping her gum, shaking her braids, walking down the street.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what you're going for, right?
Exactly. We're going for authenticity. So we want people to see themselves. I want you to come and see the show and see yourself in these women, the beauty of these women, and how they guide this young lady into making good decisions.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And having a Broadway actress directing this show, I mean, that's, I guess, you couldn't ask for more with the children's theater.
I think it speaks to the level of professionalism that this city deserves. It's allowing actors to work with collaborators who are working in all varying levels of our industry, but particularly Broadway artists, to have that gift to express both to Broadway audiences each night, but then how we introduce the theater arts to a young person. And we have a responsibility as storytellers. And so knowing we have someone like Jasmine at the helm with our incredible writing team and full team of designers, it's exciting because that's what I think is at the heart of collaboration and what it means to be in shared community.
You know, at a time when literally, you walked into the room today, and I had this here just typing away to somebody in my newsroom. I said, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, guys. But as you know, we walk in any room these days, and the kids are all sitting in a group, but everybody's on their own phone.
Right.
So how does the children's theater stay relevant in this day and age with, you know, technology just kind of taking up all the air in the room in a lot of ways?
Exactly.
Oh, it's a good point, and I think it's part of the score of Hula Hoopin' Queen.
Yeah.
It is as if you would turn on the radio and hear something that as you walk down the street on your AirPods.
Exactly. It's really about meeting the kids where they are. We're not trying to judge them. We're not trying to reprimand them. We just want to meet them where they are. And with this particular show, it's multi-generational. So you'll get jazz, hip hop, R&B, which is what we want.
Yeah, the music really makes the show.
It drives the show. So I'm very excited to share that with everybody.
And just so, how does that work? You guys go about picking the music together? What, you know?
No, well, our wonderful playwright Tia Deshazar, she also wrote the lyrics and the
Okay.
book, and then we have Derek Byers, who is our composer. They just knew what to do to make this kind of all work together, but they basically built the score. And so the score and the book come to me, and then I go from there to build the world.
Yeah. And did you know early on that you wanted to do more than just act? That
I did, but I didn't know exactly what that meant. And I think directing kind of fell into my life at the right time, where I was like, I want to do more than just be a part or just a puzzle piece. I want to tell the full story. And so it just kind of gradually progressed to directing.
Okay, I think it's just wonderful. You guys are, he's like, yeah, I know we're good. So the show, February 28th, right?
Yes, we start February 28th, and we have a really beautiful opportunity for pre-show and post-show activities. So it's not just about going to the theater and sitting in the dark. It's how do we bring the educational components alive to the families, and so that you can go home and keep your Hula Hoopin' Queen stories all the way on the train.
Hula Hoopin' Queen stories. I love the title too, and I'm excited to see the show. And I think that you pointed out that both children and adults are going to find something in this.
Absolutely. We suggest 5 and up in terms of children, but it's definitely for a family.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to send folks to nycchildrenstheater.org, and they can find times, ticket prices. You can buy tickets at that website.
Absolutely.
Is that right? February 28th through March 15th. All right. And it's along Theater Row.
Yes, right on 42nd Street.
Thank you guys so much for being here. I love that title, Hula Hoopin' Queen.
Very catchy.
Yes, it was actually one of Oprah's picks too. You can check it out on YouTube.
Well, there you are.
Yes, it is.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure meeting you. We'll be right back. Thank you for joining us on Here and Now. If you missed any portion of today's show, you can watch at abc7ny.com/here and now, or listen to our podcast wherever you subscribe. If you'd like to comment or share your story, email us at hereandnow@wabc.com or follow us on Facebook and Instagram. I'm Sandra Bookman. Enjoy the rest of your day.